Yep, Jude is back. So if you guys are
Okay.
ready, we'll start it off in 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to the Mystical Underground. Thank you for joining us. This is Rob McGregor and
Trish McGregor
and our tech magician producer John Posey. You can go to the mysticalunderground.com where we make regular blog posts and where you can find out about our books. Our most recent nonfiction book is The Shift, Reports from the Mystical Underground. Trish's latest novel is White Crows, and Rob's latest novel is Tulpas, now available in audio as well as print and ebook.
We have two guests today who have both appeared here separately. The first is Jude Currivan, a Ph.D., is a key cosmologist, futurist, planetary healer, member of the Evolutionary Leaders Circle, and previously one of the most senior businesswomen in the UK. She has a master's degree in physics from Oxford and a doctorate in archaeology from the University of Reading. She has traveled extensively, worked with wisdom keepers from many traditions, and is a lifelong researcher into the nature of reality. She's the author of 6 books, The Cosmic Hologram, and her newest book is The Story of Gaia, The Big Breath, and the Evolutionary Journey of Our Conscious Planet.
Okay, our other guest today is Andrew MacPhearson, a world-renowned photographer. He has worked for top fashion magazines such as Vogue and Bazaar. His work has regularly appeared on albums and magazine covers and movie posters. He's also the author of A Quest of Spirit, about his exploration of the spirit world. While he's had some mystical experiences as a child, it was after he turned 26 when a floodgate of experiences and dreams and wild synchronicities opened his eyes to the mystery of spirit. Welcome back, both of you.
Thank you. I've been looking so forward to this.
Yeah, we've tried to get this together a couple of times, and different aspects of life interfered, but now here we are.
Okay.
And it's great to meet you, Andrew. I'm so excited about this exploration together.
Yeah.
Okay, Jude, from I get the first one. Okay, from a cosmological perspective, what is synchronicity? I mean, how does it work according to cosmological order?
Well, the old paradigm of the cosmos couldn't incorporate it. It couldn't incorporate the sort of experiences that Andrew and I've had over many years of what we call, perhaps, Andrew, you might refer to them too as supernormal, not supernatural or paranormal, but supernormal phenomena, because the old paradigm of our universe was essentially materialistic and based on separation. And even though we had the clues from 20th century science of quantum physics and relativity physics, it's only very much more recently that by incorporating the concept of meaningful information and what's called the holographic principle, is that an emergent cosmology of a living and evolving universe that essentially does so as a non-locally unified entity means that although within space-time, the speed of light is the cosmic speed cop for any signaling, our universe, by existing and evolving as a non-locally unified entity, knows itself in its entirety. And so phenomena such as synchronicities, which don't violate causality within space-time, nonetheless bring that non-local reality into a moment, into a here and now, which of its nature has intrinsic meaning.
Yeah, it seems like synchronicity is like right on the border between our material world and the deeper reality, and that's how we can reflect on it and look into the deeper side.
Exactly. And, you know, the more we're realizing, you know, that sense of material reality and deeper, again, we sort of have this duality based. It's rather more like, you know, an ongoing notes in a piano. But yes, you're absolutely right, Rob. What appears in what we call what is the appearance of our universe, its energy, matter, space, time, indeed does arise from those deeper levels of causation, and meaningfully, and imbued with universal and cosmic and, you know, co-creative intelligence. So synchronicities are wonderful way showers, arising from that deeper meaning.
I'd like to bring Andrew in here. Andrew, you've been on this quest regarding spirit for a long time. In your mid-20s, you had some experiences that woke you up to the reality of existence beyond the five senses. Could you talk about that, in particular, your astonishing interaction with a deceased person? And when we had you on before, it was something we didn't get to, which was, I don't know why, because there was so much else to talk about. But could you talk a little bit about that experience?
Yes, and it it actually relates, Jude, to, you talked about, you actually, at one point in the book, talk about the unitive narrative, but you also do talk about your own experiences with spirit, with seeing things in nature, with seeing the life in plants and the energies of plants. Those are all things that I've experienced. But it really began when I came to Los Angeles. I met a girl and we fell in love, but she had had a husband who had taken his own life a year before because he had bipolar disorder. And I then, when I first went to her apartment, I realized he was there, and I would just talk to him like a friend and say, I don't mean any harm. I'm just, and then he was with me for about 15, 20 years. And
Wow.
I put a huge amount of the luck and the extraordinary things that have happened to me in Los Angeles down to his kindness, his guidance. I got to do a lot of the things I know he would have loved to have done, and I really do, very much believe that he was a part of it. And a quick story, but I don't want to go too deep in my story because I've got so many questions for Jude. I want to learn. But yeah, I did have an experience where I had, because I've always been on this path, whenever I hear of a psychic or a medium, I want to see them. So I had a psychic come here, and he said to me, one of the things he said during our meeting was, you're going to photograph the spirits, but you're going to think it's something wrong with your equipment, but it's not. Well, about 6-7 months later, I was doing a shoot for English Elle magazine at that point and the model came to the house. We shot at my house here in Los Angeles. She came to the house, she walked in and she said, "Ooh, the spirit's here." She's in the broad Yorkshire accent. And I was like, "Yeah, it's John, don't worry." And for 2 days, she proceeded to have a conversation with John, and it was no question, it was him. Everything checked out, because obviously I could ring his ex-wife and say, "Listen, John said this, and this. Does this make sense?" Everything checked out. But on the film, there were all these streaks of light all over the film. And back in those days, we were doing Polaroids, and the Polaroids were covered in streaks of light. Never seen it before. And it was, it was literally framing this girl, these incredible streaks of light. And so that was, my experience of photographing spirit. But to jump back to where your question, Trish, I had a similar question, which was about déjà vu, which I think links to synchronicity. And again, I was wondering if déjà vu is in some way, because you talk about the fractal unfolding, if you will, the chaos theory, patterns that with the Mandelbrot patterns we're familiar with. Do you think that I've always tried to understand déjà vu? Do you think it could be echoes within those unfolding patterns?
Yeah, Andrew, I love that story, and I've had many experiences of engaging, communicating with dead folks as well, and beyond sort of any doubt that our consciousness continues beyond the demise of our physical bodies. I've worked with ancestors over many years who told me so much. And I don't know if you're finding this, but just to divert slightly, because I think this is important, I'm very much sensing, and have done for the last sort of 25, 30 years, that the ancestors are coming forward. We're not going back. They're coming forward. And I get this whole sense of, this great convergence of our universal story and this evolutionary leap, with so much support on so many levels, but very much the ancestors, coming forward to add their support in all of this. So just in the point of the déjà vu, and also just to say that we don't tend to use the word chaos theory anymore. Some years ago, it was realized that what appeared as chaos often underpinning it was as underlying order. So it's rather more called now complexity theory, this realization of that, you know, the innate, meaningfully informed nature of all phenomena. But in terms of complexity, you're absolutely right, Andrew. Those patterns going forward. So yeah, for me, déjà vu is like those ripples, those memories. And again, there's no violation of causality within space-time. This is what I keep coming back to, because, you know, sometimes we think there might be with supernormal phenomena, but none that I've researched and other researchers have come across, I think, in the last 40, 50 years. Really, when they're really drilled into and understood what's going on, none of them violate that universal causality within space-time.
So, Jude, go ahead, Andrew. You want to say something?
I was going to say what you said about the ancestors. On another, I actually been emailing with Trish about some visions I've had since I discovered you through the Mystic Underground, and since we've started talking, and it is very much, I've been shown the difference between the forces of dark and the forces of light, and I very much have been called to stand up and be counted. And so when you're talking about the ancestors, I have become aware there is a really dark force trying to have its way with civilization or with the planet or with consciousness. I'm not even quite sure what it is, but how I've been shown it is literally it is eating souls. It lives on the energy of broken souls. So it's quite a shocking, startling image. And you know, obviously
it's not ancestral though, is it?
No, it's more archetypal. I would suggest, Andrew, you probably feel it's more archetypal, yeah.
Absolutely, it's very archetypal, and I don't, you know, but I wanted to, I wanted you to also discuss your clairaudience experience. I put down here of the age of remembering. So you talked about that, and that's something I would love you to expand on, because my sense is there's something very important there.
Well, to open that up, the two things I think, one is your first point about this sort of sense of darkness and light. And I've too been aware of this from a very, very early age. But around, let me think, 21 years ago, I was leading the first of what became 13 global journeys that I wrote about in a book called The 13th Step. I didn't really mean to write a book, but after those journeys were complete, it turned out they complete in 2007. I was invited to write a book, two books actually, one on the inner transformational journey and one on the sort of the journey, the sort of schlepping around the globe on these amazing journeys. But the first of those journeys for me was key because just before we went, I had been invited to lead a healing circle into a very, very disrupted energy field in the centre of England. And it was a few days before we were going to go to this journey to Egypt. And I came down with 24-hour flu, which I'm touch wood, I'm very rarely sick. But I came down just before this healing circle was meant to go to this particular place. So they went without me and they encountered a huge darkness. And they were very frightened and they retreated, which was very sensible of them to do, and asked if I could help. And I said, well, not until I come back from this journey to Egypt. So anyway, we went on the journey to Egypt, and I think there was something like 26 of us on that trip. And it turned out that it became a mass life regression.
Wow.
Literally, it was a group consciousness experience through this journey of a regression into a life lived in ancient Egypt. And I do write about it in the book. So I'm not sort of saying anything that, hasn't already been written about. But what the long story short, the story was of an order, a priestly order of light and a priestly order of shadow. And the priestly order of shadow was really moving more and more into the shadow from a place of ego and became progressively lost. Okay. It wasn't intentionally evil to begin with, but evil, if you turn it upside down, is live. So it was moving more and more away from a living
Mm.
appreciation of wholeness into this loneliness of shadow and this ego sense of shadow. But then what happened is the priesthood of the light began to judge the shadow.
Huh.
And what that did, instead of healing the shadow and enabling it to be reintegrated, the duality pushed it further and further. And the whole story played out not in that particular lifetime, but in the whole history, you know, the thread.
Wow.
History and incarnational experiences of people on that trip till
Wow.
now.
That's
So it was the
Jeez.
most extraordinary experience and the most extraordinary healing experience. But I came back from that journey realizing that if I judged the shadow, doesn't mean I don't discern and say this doesn't feel right. This is a place that is not fulfilling, you know, the wholeness of life. And what can I do about it? How can I serve that healing? But it's not to judge it and continue that play out of duality. So a few days after we got back, myself, another of the folks who were on the Egypt journey, joined the rest of the healing circle at this place where they'd entered into this field of fear. And it turned out that it went back to the time in England where there were what's called witchfinder generals. And these folks went around and identified witches and had them tortured and killed and all the rest of it. And this was a witchfinder general, or the spirit of a witchfinder general, who'd gone down that shadow route from a place of ego. And now was very, very powerful in his own sense. He was a legend in his own lunchtime, as we say here in the UK. But he was, you know, he was empowered by that. And so if we'd have gone into that situation before Egypt, I might have behaved in a different way, you know, because in those days, a lot of folks working with this word, begone, spirit, begone. And I didn't feel that at all. I felt incredible compassion for this soul who had lost his way. And so by going in with that unconditional love, what happened was wonderful and extraordinary. I could see his spirit. We could see his spirit. And there was a tree in this area that was like the mother tree. And as we just bathed him in love, his spirit moved more and more closely to that tree. And then literally was embraced by the essence of the tree. And his whole spirit was just released. It was wonderful.
That's incredible.
But it showed me that when we judge, we continue the duality, and yet we are discerning. But when we realize that in, you know, the I Ching says in the beginning is the one becomes two, the two becomes, that two can often play out in that perspective of light and shadow. And that's okay. It's when it's taken to extreme. And so by you know, unconditionally loving the wholeness, in that particular instance, it was able to heal that dis-ease and that loss and that loneliness.
That's fascinating.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Where did you write about this?
In the 13th step. At least I think I did.
Okay. Yeah.
I might be telling this story for the
That's
first
another
time.
book I have to get.
I'm naming no names. I'm naming no names, but I think I did write about it very early on in that book.
Yeah, Jude, you note that skepticism is crucial in any scientific investigation and progress, but that mainstream science rarely has been open-minded about what we're talking about the paranormal investigations, and it's also often vehemently oppositional and even hostile towards these realms, these concepts, and that, you say, isn't a viable worldview. So how does the cosmic holograph offer a plausible mechanism within which to place psi phenomena or the paranormal or life after death?
Well, it does, because what it's showing, Rob, is the evidence at all scales of existence across many different fields of research that are all pointing in the same direction, that our universe meaningfully exists and purposefully evolves as a non-locally unified entity in which, therefore, as I said earlier, it knows itself in its wholeness. And of course, it is innately mindful. You know, mind and consciousness aren't what we have. They are literally what we in the whole world are. Now, what we might not have shared on the last time we were together is that that universal non-locality, I think I mentioned an experiment in 2018 with a group of universities, including MIT.
Oh, yeah, you did mention that.
Yeah, that were able to non-locally entangle photons of light in their lab, starlight from 600 light years away, and light triggered by light from a quasar, very active galactic center 12.2 billion years ago, which is a cosmological scale. What has happened since then is in late 2022, the Nobel Prize for Physics was given to 3 researchers, Alan Aspect, John Clauser, and Anton Zeilinger, for their decades-long experimentation on universal non-locality. Now, the point is, the Nobel's only given for settled science. Einstein did not get his Nobel for relativity because it was still so contentious. He got it for the photoelectric effect. So the fact that the Nobel in 2022 was given for experimenters proving, showing that our whole universe is non-locally unified in this way, which naturally then encompasses all that we're sharing here. It's multidimensional, it's innately conscious, where, you know, archetypal intelligences, ancestral intelligences, our consciousness goes beyond the demise of our body. A natural, that's why it's not paranormal, Rob. It's supernormal for sure. Although I get some moments down the supermarket, so, you know, whatever, but it's supernormal. It's not supernatural or paranormal. But the fact that the Nobel was given for this work shows that it's now settled science. So those that are still clinging to a materialistic, separated separation paradigm, they literally are, you know, falling behind what the evidence is leading to. And as good scientists, you know, skepticism's good, cynicism is not so good. And so to follow the evidence wherever it leads, and that's what I write about in the Cosmic Hologram, and it's what I write about in the Story of Gaia.
So mainstream science.
I have a question. I have a question. Your story, Jude, about this entity, it actually, it kind of, it illustrates one of the things you talk about in your book, that love is an actual force. Is it a force like gravity?
No.
Well, love, you know, for me, love is the foundational essence of our universe, because, you know, love is all about connectedness. It's all about interdependence. And we know that our universe is innately interrelated, foundationally unified. So, you know, if love's about connection, then fear and all these other attributes, the perception of separation. So I talk about what I write as being the science of love. And it goes way beyond sort of sense of human love, wonderful that is.
Right.
This is essentially a benevolent, living and loving universe that we're speaking of here.
Andrew.
Personally, I've always felt love and creation to be the same thing.
Yeah, I agree. I love that, Andrew. And, you know, I speak a lot. I've been speaking more and more about, you know, the going back to the ancient wisdom of the one becoming differentiated. It isn't separated, it's differentiated as to the 2 into 3 and 3 into 10,000 things. So, you know, throughout the universe, that initiating wholeness differentiated into 2 and 3, we might speak of as being the divine feminine, the divine masculine. But when we bring those together, then the divine child, that third, that essence, then emerges, and it's an essence of creativity. Isn't it? Because when we're creative, we're children again, you know, whatever we're doing.
Yeah, that's true. Again.
And it's joyous too.
It's joyous. It's joyous, exactly. And if it's not joyous, why the heck are we doing it?
Good point.
So I do have some physics questions, just because I'm eternally curious. So I know we've been on spirit, and I could talk to you for hours on spirit, but there's a few things, just technical things, which I know will be quick answers. You mentioned that the universe, as it's expanding, is flat. I know Lawrence Krauss talked about that a lot, but yet when we look at the cosmic microwave background, it appears to be a circle, or it appears that our expanding universe is expanding like a circular firework, or if you will. So how is the universe both flat and circular at the same time?
Well, flat and circular aren't innately oppositional, because you could have a disc, for example, which is flat and it's circular, but that isn't quite the way it is. The reason we talk about the flat geometry of our universe, of space-time, is if it wasn't flat, E wouldn't equal MC squared. And the reason for that,
Oh, wow.
we can go back to our school geometry, and hands up for anybody who remembers Pythagoras.
Yeah.
Yay! And, you know, on a right angle triangle, the square on the hypotenuse of a right angle triangle is equal to the sum of the squares on the other two sides. That is only if you draw a triangle on a flat piece of paper, yeah, where the inner angles total to 180, yeah. But that's a very special geometry, because if you turn that paper and you sort of either make it concave or convex, the triangle will not have the same number of angles. It will not have 180. It'll have less or it'll have more. So the fact that our Pythagoras is based on flat geometry, essentially. Now, there's a lovely book called Y equals MC squared, and I think Why It Matters, by Professor Brian Cox and Jeff Forshaw. And what they do is they track from the Pythagorean triangle into space-time, because of course a triangle is just about space. It's about the relationships of the angles and the sides of the triangle in space. But you can actually track it into space-time. And when you do that, you come out with the, it's a whole book to do this, but basically you come out with E equals MC squared. If the geometry of our universe was not flat, E would not equal MC squared. And if E didn't equal MC squared, we'd be living in a very different universe. And all the cosmological evidence from things like the WMAP probes show that it is indeed flat to you know, the best limit of our technologies at the moment. Now, when you talk about the cosmic microwave background, the reason that you often see the map of the background, it looks rather like an elliptical rather than a circle, is that's the field view of the probe looking around. But what you also see in it are tiny temperature fluctuations. And those temperature fluctuations are often shown on the map in terms of slightly different colors. But those temperature differences from a 2017 experiment analyzing them are shown to be fractal. In other words, they embody the same fractal relationships in terms of temperature differences that we see as fractal patterns, literally from the very smallest, you know, atomic scales all the way up to that fulfillment of space-time, because the cosmic microwave background fills space. It's a relic radiation held over from the very earliest epoch of our universe. So going back to circular, a sphere, if you think of a three-dimensional sphere, and of course we're talking now about a holographic projection or an appearance of space-time, three-dimensional space, one of time, but it actually flattens out. A sphere topologically does not have flat space, but a toroid does. And so more and more, you know, there are still some wrinkles in this, but it's suggesting that our universe is more toroidal as it expands, rather than, if you like, circular or spherical as it expands.
Okay.
Does that help?
Well, now I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just asking Andrew, does that shed any light?
It not really. It's amazing. I can't visualize it. I mean, I can visualize a torus expanding, but you know, but again, it's because I did have a question about the Big Bang. You know, you mentioned that at the beginning of the universe,
Big breath.
it was hotter than, yes, it's ever been. But what was the source of that heat, of that energy? Where, you know, because that energy itself must have had a source. So I know that in science, you're not allowed to ask what was here before the Big Bang or the Big Bang, and what is the universe expanding into? Because I fell into that when I was interviewing that girl, Maria, whose team actually won the Nobel Prize at CERN for proving the Higgs boson. And I interviewed her and her boyfriend for Question of Spirit. And, you know, they just laughed and they said, you're not allowed to ask those questions because the answer can only be conjecture. But I wondered if you had an answer, like where did the energy for that heat come from? what
There's-
was that?
There's two things really, because in a way you have to ask that question. If you're going to get into a
Interesting.
deeper understanding of why the universe is as it is. Yeah. So I think it's a legitimate question. I mean, it's very challenging, certainly in the sort of the you know, the ways we have at the moment. But I think it is legitimate to ask why our universe came into being in the way it did. Yeah. And one possibility is that our universe is essentially a white hole emanating from a black hole in an earlier universe and a
Oh,
supermassive
interesting.
hole. So we're talking about a number of ways in which, you know, Roger Penrose has talked about conformal geometry as a cosmology, but that's only geometric. We also need the time aspect. So, you know, it's very early days, but it's an important question to be asking, I think, to help deepen our understanding.
And can I piggyback off of Andrew's question real quick, because
I haven't answered
Here
it
comes
yet,
student
though.
three.
but just this week I got well, not my mind blown, but I just had not considered this in a long time. But so are we talking about an expanding universe, or the light switch just came on? But I'm sorry.
No, we're talking about a universe that came into being 13.8 billion years ago, not as an infinite singularity, but as a finite Planck scale entity, not in incredibly, you know, not in randomness or the chaos of a perceived Big Bang, but as the first moment of an incredibly fine-tuned and ordered big breath. So that ever since then, as space has expanded and time's flowed, our universe has, you know, been able to incorporate more and more information, and therefore evolve from its initial simplicity to ever greater levels of complexity. But what came into being at that point was its energy, matter, and its space-time, or as the appearance of our universe, but also as a holographic manifestation, yes, of cosmic consciousness. Okay, so the appearance of energy, matter, and space-time. Energy, matter is quantized, space-time not quantized. You raised this point, I think, in an email, because, you know, my best understanding is that space-time is not quantized. It is pixelated, and it is what I call entropic. So in other words, as time flows forward, space expands, the informational content or entropy of our universe ever increases. And entropy is a really important point, because we used to talk about entropy as the energetic microstates of a system, but we can now expand that to the entropy or the informational content of a system. And it makes much more sense when you apply that to the whole universe. But going back to Andrew's point about energy, energy can be positive or negative. Yes, it can be push-pull, it can be taking every which way. So, you know, I think it was Krauss wrote The Universe from Nothing, how everything is balanced. So the fact of the high temperature is an attribute of that balance that's sort of reflected in that particular way. But the importance about the high temperature, because you think the high temperature is incredibly energetic, but the way that the primordial electromagnetic fields ordered it, it is not, you know, rushing around like crazy and taking a lot of energy to create. Just as when we look at our sun, the surface of our sun has a temperature of about 6,000 degrees Kelvin. Okay. If we go outside the surface of our sun, the temperature is something like in millions of degrees Kelvin. Okay. But because it's so ordered by magnetic fields, it's not sort of, you know, chaotic in that sense, or, you know, dramatically energetic in that sense. But the reason that the high temperature is so crucial is it's called the Planck temperature, and it's 10 to the 32 degrees Kelvin. I mean, it's very, very high. But the reason for that is our universe began in its lowest entropic state and its highest temperature. As space has expanded and time's flowed ever since, the temperature has dropped as the entropy has increased. And the third law of thermodynamics that I've now restated as a third law of infodynamics is indeed that in a contained system, the temperature and the entropy are inversely proportional. So what that temperature gradient does is it drives the whole cycle of our universe. It's crucial. And so when we dig down to the most fundamental scale of our universe, in which its reality, its appearance comes into being, we find there are 4 universal constants: the speed of light, gravitational constant, Planck's constant, which is the sort of the quantum of action, and Boltzmann's constant, which refers to thermodynamics and infodynamics. From those, and temperature, all the ways of describing energy and matter and space-time can be put together in formula, really simple formula, just different variations of those constants and those attributes that are the basic pixelation of our universe. They're the basic reality scale of our universe. So it literally all fits together when you understand it in this way. You don't need any more equations. You don't need a blackboard full of equations. You need the very basics. You know, Newton's 3 laws of motion do a lot. You know, equals mc squared. You know, you've got some incredibly profoundly simple equations that literally are the building blocks, the relational building blocks of the entire appearance of our universe.
Jude, one of our listeners named Devin has a question. If the universe is experiencing accelerated expansion, would time speed up, slow down, go berserk? Would it register on a clock? Would the animals sense it?
Well, thank you, Devin. That's a great question. Well, it's been expanding. It's been accelerating its expansion, we reckon, for the last 5 billion years. So I think we'd have noticed by now if that was actually happening. But it's really important, and this gets pretty sciencey, so we'll probably stop at a point rather than go down the rabbit hole on it. But entropy, the nature of entropy, which is the informational content of a closed system, entropy follows an arrow of time. In other words, the entropy of a contained system increases through time. But the point of that is that it means that there is a past, a present, and a future to unfold. But when you look at the way that entropy works, implies acceleration. Okay? So velocity or constant speed is not of itself entropic. If you move at a meter a second, you're not really adding entropy. But if you're moving at a meter per second, you're accelerating. The past is different from the present and for the future. So more and more scientists are appreciating that forces of themselves are entropic. You know, F equals ma, force equals mass times acceleration. The more you apply a force to a mass, the more that acceleration continues till you stop that force. So by differentiating from when a force is being applied or when it's not, we have a deeper understanding of the way space and time work. So when we look at our whole universe, this shows is that from its very beginning, first moment of this minute big breath, as space has expanded and time's flowed, for the whole informational content of our universe, the entropy to continue to increase. The expansion of our universe, the great prediction is it cannot be at a constant velocity. It has to accelerate or decelerate or accelerate again to enable that entropic accumulation. And that's what we've seen. That does not mean that universal time itself speeds up or not. It just means that the whole process of the cycle of our universe, because at the Planck scale of time is constant. It's minute. It's 10 to the minus 44 seconds. But universal time is constant in each Planck scale moment as time flows and each Planck scale area of our universe expands. That's the whole story. It doesn't mean universal time changes in any way on its 13.8 billion journey from that first moment to this.
But in the early days of the universe, did time move more slowly?
No.
No? Okay.
It's just the process of
Yeah,
the expansion of space, whether it accelerates, decelerates, accelerates. It's the acceleration or the deceleration. It doesn't matter which in that sense. It's still, because it's decelerating, but it's still expanding.
It's a process. I'm sorry, it's a process versus a measurement, right? And I mean, to some extent, yeah.
Well, it is, but even if we were to measure, for example, if we were to go back into Star Wars, you know, galaxy far, far away and a long, long time ago, we'd still be measuring universal time and the Planck scale then as we would now. Because it's a natural fundamental attribute of the appearance of our universe.
Because you need to dispute some of these articles I've been reading. This article it says, I read an article about how in the early days of the universe, time moved more slowly.
No, there's no evidence.
And I thought, well, we need to ask Jude. Okay.
There's no evidence for that. I mean, I you know, if there's more evidence that shows it, but I've looked at the evidence. You know, I've been doing this stuff for, God knows, 66 years now. You know, I'll follow the evidence. If evidence comes forward that shows that, I'm with you. But I've seen absolutely no evidence, and I read all this stuff as well.
Interesting.
There's a huge amount of speculation, which is great, but we can't mistake speculation for evidence. You know, we from speculation to hypothesis to theory. You know, and we keep moving. So it's a lot of fun to. What I've found over the last few years, and I think this is actually quite potentially problematic, is that, you know, speculation becomes misinformation. That's not terribly helpful.
So I have, since I see time is ticking away, I have one question that I feel is my most important question. So in the previous interview I did here, I talked about, I've now 3 times seen what people would call UFOs. So you don't have to be a believer when you've had an experience. Experience trumps belief. So in my understanding of this, the question I formed is, could this reality in some way be defined by a frequency, like a radio station we're tuned to, which generates the structures of our dimension as we see in cymatics? And could other dimensions exist right here, right now, as other radio stations exist at the same time, but at different frequencies? The reason I ask that is because the 3 UFOs I saw, and if you go into the MUFON and you research UFO sightings, they basically all have one thing in common. They're all the size of RVs. They're not huge ships built for intergalactic travel. They're small craft built for short trips. So the only way I can figure that out is it must be interdimensional travel. If it is interdimensional travel, how on earth does that work?
Good question.
I think that's I think it's more than a great question. I think it's a great insight. Absolutely. A couple of thoughts on that. First of all, I've had UFO experiences as well. And I suspect, Andrew, similar to yours, I had one where a UFO sort of literally appeared in the sky above me as an incredible bright light. And this was sort of early-ish morning, about 8 o'clock in the morning. And it got my attention. So I sort of had the sort of conversation. And then it literally winked out. And I've had other experiences, but that one was very significant for me. And some years ago, and first of all, you know, what I'm showing the evidence for in the Cosmic Hologram and the Story of Gaia is of a multidimensional universe, where this plane, the appearance of its energy, matter, space, time, is a plane, and a very crucial plane. But there are other planes of intelligence and experiences. The thing that I found time and time again, though, is whatever phenomena emerge in our universe, in its space-time, do not violate causality. This whole journey of 13.8 billion years, you know, from that first moment in the past to this present. So I talk about as being on the bow wave. You know, we know about bow waves. When we see a boat or a ship going across a body of water, it has a bow wave. It has this sort of little fluctuating waves in front of it as it carves its way through the water. And I often use that metaphor as us being on the bow wave, here and now, of the potentiality for our universe. Because what that does is, although the past is the past and not to be causally violated, the near future, in a way, is potentizing, which is why I feel that precognition is, again, a natural attribute. As the future potentiality and possibilities come into the present, doesn't mean the laws of physics change. It just means that the exploratory consciousness that is our universe is coming into this sort of, individuated self-awareness and expression. So some while ago, I had a vision of UFOs as space hoppers. And there's some technology where they seem, this is the best I can offer at the moment. And there's so much more work to be done on this. And I want a few more conversations with my UFO friends on this. But they seem to be able to hop on this bow wave across space, but not through time per se.
Huh.
What about dimensions?
Well, yes, dimensionally, of course, because that's the whole point that Andrew's making, is that they come out of this dimension, they space hop.
Right.
Yes, they space hop on this dimensionality, and then appear and then disappear in ways, obviously some of the sightings show they move very fast within this dimension, but a lot of experiences, like the pair of us, have had them literally flick in and flick out.
Well, we have too. We've seen them like that.
Great, exactly. And it may be stealth technology, but what my vision was suggesting is that it's actually more, it's more fundamental than that.
I have one other question I want to get in before our hour is over. We are continuing to evolve as humans. Can we consciously move this our evolution along rather than it just happening at an unconscious level?
Oh, good heavens. I mean, I spent my whole life trying to serve this.
Sure, Rob. Where have you been?
It's waking up. When we're not aware, we're not aware. So how can we, each of us, and help to link up and lift up all of us, become more aware? Yeah. That's the key. And, right in the story of Gaia, we see a conscious universe evolving, both through its appearance and consciously in terms of individuated self-awareness, coming to a point where we can have this conversation. But the point of it is that, 99+% of all biological species that have shared this story of Gaia as a planetary mother are now extinct, because a point comes in biological evolution where you sort of hit the buffers in a way, because as simplicity evolves to complexity, the complexity also means that from a biological perspective, that organism is less flexible, less able to biologically evolve further. And so our potential for evolution isn't a biological potential, but it is a conscious potential. It's how can we wake up? We've been in a paradigm of separation. We've had a dis-ease of separation. How do we wake up to remember we're inseparable? How do we wake up and grow up to become co-evolutionary partners of the evolutionary impulse of our entire universe and planetary home? How do we realize that beyond being human beings, we're Gaians? That's happening. And that's happening. That is happening. So for each of us, it seems that both in our own journey, because it begins with us, of course, how can we share this? How can we help and serve? And it's not an imposition. It's an invitation, because it's such an invitation to an incredible adventure of the next steps of what we can potentially evolve to become.
My God, I want to come to one of your classes. I was just entranced.
I don't do classes really. I mean, I'm very grateful. I'm doing a humanities team masterclass just now, but I do so, yeah.
I would just be spellbound.
And really, that might be a really good place to leave it, because that sounded like a mic drop to me. So, yeah. So I mean, unless I mean, technically
No.
got 5 minutes left, but yeah, we just need to do this again, I think, and let Jude get back to some Wimbledon.
Yeah, we also need to do the
I'd
Story
love
of Gaia.
I'd love to do it on the Story of Gaia. I'd love to have Andrew with us as well. As I say, I think the audio book is due out in the next couple of months. So keep an eye.
Great.
But it'd be great maybe later in the year to come together again. There's so much more to it.
That would be wonderful.
That'd be great. Okay.
Will
Thank you very much.
Will you email us when it's out?
To be honest, I probably, it's easier if you just keep an eye open on Amazon.
Okay.
If that's okay. I've got my bandwidth runneth over at the moment. So.
And are you doing any trips that you said you like the trip to Egypt? Are you going to do any more trips like that?
Not that I'm aware of, unless I'm called. I mean, I did, oh gosh, I was doing 25, 30 trips of guiding people. They're in the book, but many, many more. But what I'm doing now, actually, I'm more involved now in working with the Unitive Narrative, which I help co-draft for the Evolutionary Leaders, and working with the United Nations on a unitive approach to all the SDGs, but also working with some incredible leading regenerative economists like John Fullerton, John Elkington, Clugston, Stuart Wallace, others, on how do we develop a unitive economics based on unitive principles that actually then can serve people and planet, beyond even regenerative economics, to profoundly, unity and diversity, unity and belonging way of a unitive economics. So there's a lot now I'm working with that with a lot of folks, and hopefully that'll start to become more visible as we go through the
overcoming greed is an important factor.
Well, this is it. It's so obvious, Rob, isn't it? Because we cannot have transformational change without a transformational worldview.
Right.
If we're still working off a worldview of separation and materialism, we're stuffed. So this is our work, isn't it? This is our conscious evolution. This is our service. Yeah. So the more each and all of us can help share this as widely as possible. And we have the evidence. For me, this is the game changer. We have the science that converges with universal wisdom teachings to show us this.
This is so exciting. I honestly believe the greatest evil in the world right now is the cartel of central banks, their control of money, the World Economic Forum. There's a huge amount of darkness, greed, and the desire to control going on.
But you know what's really interesting? I was part of a panel on a what's called a high-level political forum event at the United Nations on Friday with all of this stuff. And for the first time ever, the United Nations adopted what's called a thematic cluster of a whole raft of NGOs late last year based on this unitive narrative. First time ever. And so the work of this whole sort of group of folks, these NGOs now, is bringing this unitive narrative into policy making in the United Nations. But the high-level political forum this last week was absolutely awash with everybody saying we have to have a transformation in our economics. When you've got nations that half of their GDP is based on interest payment for debt.
Yeah.
When you have that level of sort of inequality, which are all driven by dis-ease and a worldview of separation, if conflict's a natural outcome of separation, then peace is a natural outcome of wholeness. So this is what I'm working on with so many folks. So not just watch this space, but get involved, because so much is starting to really now say this is the time.
Oh, this is exciting.
I would love to get involved. How do we do it?
Well, first of all, share. I mean, what we do at Whole Worldview is we serve the understanding, experiencing, and embodying of unitive awareness. So that of itself is bringing a lot of this forward. So just share the website link as much as possible. I will make sure that, as these things move forward, we have a newsletter that shares this and shares anybody who's doing this work. It's free to everybody. Just sign up for that and just be a champion. Just be a champion.
Where do we sign up, Jude?
Okay.
Go to wholeworld-view.org.
Yep.
And sign up for
And-
the newsletter. But look on the resources there. There's the science. There's all the podcasts I do. So this will be on there. I did a podcast.
Great.
You may not know a guy called Alex Ferrari. He does something called Next Level Soul. We did a podcast a month ago. And, I did a podcast with Deepak Chopra at the end of last year, and it had 23,000 views, which is not bad.
Wow.
But guess how many the one that I've done with Alex has got so far? It's a bit more than 23,000.
100,000.
Probably.
616.
Wow, that is great.
I was going to go 1 million, but okay. Yep.
It's getting there. It's getting there. And that's counting.
Interesting.
So anything we can do to share the word of this and get people to, hear all of this in so many different ways. There's so many different voices, so many different ways, but to realize that this is a tidal wave of the shift.
It is
Okay.
going on, yes.
And we will share the link wherever we post this podcast. And so Jude, if you need to get back to your duty as a Brit as far as Wimbledon goes, please don't let us keep you. So
Okay.
Bless you
This
guys.
was
I'm so
wonderful.
grateful.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And Andrew,
Again,
thank you.
Thank
of
you,
course.
Andrew. We'll do it again.
And we'll do this again.
Yay, absolutely. And just to say, when you send me the link, we will share it through our social media, and we will certainly put it
Okay.
on the website and share it as widely as possible.
Great.
Yeah, and John,
Okay.
I need the
Thank
name
you.
of that website. I lost my pen.
Yep. I'll get it to you. It'll be in the description.
Okay.
And so Jude, if you need to drop off and get back to Wimbledon, and then Andrew,
Thank you
if
so
you want to hang on
much.
for a second and let people know how they can get in touch with you. Okay.
Thank you, John.
All right.
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks,
Take
Rob.
care.
Thanks. Lots
Thank
of
you.
love.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank
Till
you.
the next time.
Okay.
Absolutely. I hope so. Yes.
Bye for now.
Thank you.
I know.
Bye. Okay,
I got
Andrew. Yeah. If you want to let people know where they can get in touch
can
with
go.
you, and we'll point them to you in the description.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I'm probably I'm on Twitter as McFly Corp, but I don't really use Twitter that much. And then on
You have a website?
Yeah, I do. I have two. I have McFly.com, which is the work website. But, I mean, the truth of our world, I'm old, I'm white, I'm straight, and I'm a man. Which means nobody in the media wants to employ me. So if you go to my work website, you'll see that I haven't actually done any work in the media for 3 years now, since, before COVID. But that's macfly.com, MACFLY.com. And then my personal website is andrewmacpherson.com.